GrayLaw TV, what's going on, guys? How are you?
Back again.
Yeah, good. So last month, our B1, B2 segment got 9,000 views in a month.
Yes, sir.
So people are liking our content, and that's really cool. So,
Good deal.
what do you guys want to talk about today?
I think people are curious about the marriage petition
And the interviews.
and the interviews.
Yeah.
What they say or do.
What are they going to be asked?
What kind of questions you get to answer?
Yeah, so let's talk about marriage cases. That sounds great, because I think that's a subject you're right. I mean, a lot of people want to know what happens, at the interview, and what are the requirements for a marriage case. So marriage cases, I think there's basically two types, right? You can have a foreigner who's marrying a permanent resident green card holder, and you can have a foreigner who is marrying a U.S. citizen. So two different types of cases. Let's kind of talk about the first one. Let's talk about the second preference petition, where the foreign national marries a permanent resident.
Okay, so I think that's basically the biggest difference between, marrying a U.S. citizen and a permanent resident is the time. When you married a permanent resident as a spouse, you have to enter into a category. So you have to wait until that category becomes current.
How do you know when it becomes current?
You can look it up online, and you can look the category for spouses of permanent residents, and it says how long, depending on which country also. There's some other countries that have a separate category where, because there's so many here, they get to wait a little longer. But you can just go online and look at it.
So they go to statedepartment.gov, they go to Visa Bulletin, and then they'll check the 2A category.
Correct, and they would say
look
like
at
a
the
date.
Okay.
And that would be the date.
All right,
and you take
cool.
it.
Right, so you file the petition.
Correct.
It gets approved in how long? About 8 months, maybe?
8
8 months to a year? And then what happens?
Well,
then you have to wait.
you have to wait.
There's a line.
There's a line. So how long is the wait usually?
A year or a year and a half. So it's not that bad. It's been worse before. It's actually really good.
By the time it's approved,
That's good news.
they
It's
should
been
be
worse.
close to getting, either their interview at the consulate or with immigration here in the U.S. if they're here.
So Karen, for the filing fees, what are the prices on that for the marriage cases?
Well, the filing fees that are required by the government
Right.
to just look at your forms and
Exactly.
review your case, for their I-130, it's $535 currently. For the I-485, it's $1,225. So I believe that's $1,760 total filing fees, and that's the money that goes to the government
To file the petition.
to file
Right.
the petition, correct?
So that's the 2A category, right? What about if a foreign national marries a U.S. citizen? What's the process there?
Do
It's
the
immediate, right?
paperwork right away. Get it
Bingo.
done.
Your priority date is the day they file it, or the date they received it, right?
Absolutely. So what are you saying? If you're a foreigner and you're here in the U.S., do you look to marry a resident or a citizen? No, just kidding. We gotta be careful with that one, right?
Whoever you fall in love with.
Good answer.
The very first step is to fall in love.
That's where
There
you
is
go.
no reason to do
Step
this
one.
unless you're actually getting married. They know the difference now. These days, they know if a marriage is real or not. They check everything. They look at your credit. They look at the last place you reported that you were living when you got a speeding ticket. They look at so many different things now.
Sure.
It should be a legit marriage. I would not chance this with a stranger or your friend or something like that.
And then, so what's the second step?
The second step is you call us.
No, step 2 is you have to buy a ring,
Oh,
and then you have to propose.
Right.
Get married. You fall in love. You get married. Then you come see us.
Okay, then you come see us.
Call GrayLaw.
So let's talk a little bit about the requirements for what we call the immediate relative petition. That's where a foreigner marries a U.S. citizen.
Right.
What's the waiting time from filing until the time they get the green card?
We've been seeing anywhere from 6 to 18 months.
Yep. Okay. So that's pretty fast.
Yeah,
I mean, that's probably one of the fastest ways to get a green card.
it is. It absolutely is.
What if they're overseas and we have to process at a U.S. consulate? How long does that take? Because it can't be done either way, right?
Right.
It could be done here in the U.S. or it can be done overseas.
At the consulate, you probably have to add another 6 months to the 6 to 8 month period because they need to pick up the green card at the consulate. Obviously, takes a little bit of time for USCIS to send information to NBC, then ultimately to the consulate. And at that point, we're looking at about a year. So it'd be 6 months on top of the 6 months initially that it would take for an adjustment of status here in the U.S.
Okay. A year. So it's usually a little longer if you're going to process overseas than if you're going to process here in the U.S.
Exactly.
What are the filing fees for that? Is that different then?
Yes, then they have to pay NVC fees, which are $445, and that's National Visa Center. And that's to get the appointment at the consular appointment.
Okay, and that's all the fees you need to pay then?
In addition to the I-130, the 535 has to be paid for everybody.
Cool. Okay.
So you
And
can
what
go
do
ahead
we
and
need?
get-
What? Go ahead.
No, so then you can go ahead and also get your work and travel permission funds awaiting before your green card.
If you're here.
If you're here in the U.S., so that's a lot faster. That's a good people.
That's a good point. How long does it usually take before they get the work permit and the travel permit here?
I would say about 3 to 5 months probably.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
People talk about this conditional green card that's good for 2 years. What is that through marriage?
So the conditional green card is a temporary 2-year green card that they issue to anyone that's been married for less than 2 years. So they assume that any marriage that's less than 2 years old is fraud. And so when they initially give you the green card, they'll only give it to you for 2 years because they want to see if you're still married at the end of the 2 years, and then we file to remove all the conditions. There is actually an opportunity for getting your conditions removed even if you're divorced, but that's a little technical, so we'll
Sure.
see us.
I see. So, absolutely. So at the time of the interview, your first interview, if the marriage is less than 2 years, then immigration is going to give you a 2-year green card.
Right.
And is there a difference between this 2-year green card and, let's say, a permanent green card?
Just the validity period, just that it's 2 years.
Okay, so you can
Everything
travel
else
with
is
it,
the same.
you can work with it. Okay.
It is a green card.
Okay, so yeah, those are the marriage petitions. It's a good way to get to the U.S. Probably the immediate relative petition, the one where you marry a U.S. citizen here in the U.S. By all visas, is probably the fastest you can get a green card in the U.S. Yeah, so, well, that's great. We look to do a lot of these petitions.
Go fall in love.
All right, go fall in love.